Afghanistan, a landlocked country in south-central Asia, bears a daunting nickname: the graveyard of empires. This moniker speaks to the nation's long and turbulent history, marked by relentless resistance against foreign powers. From the British Empire in the 19th century to the Soviet Union in the 20th and more recently, the United States in the 21st, each superpower faced fierce opposition from the Afghan people, ultimately leading to their withdrawal. These failed campaigns have cemented Afghanistan's reputation as a place where empires meet their demise. The British Empire, at the height of its power, learned this lesson the hard way during the First Anglo-Afghan War from 1839 to 1842. What began as a confident attempt to secure British interests quickly devolved into a humiliating defeat. The British faced relentless attacks from Afghan tribesmen, masters of guerrilla warfare who exploited the rugged terrain. The Soviets too encountered a similar fate in the 20th century. Their decade-long occupation from 1979 to 1989 was met with fierce resistance from Afghan Mujahideen fighters, supplied and supported by the United States. Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain has played a pivotal role in shaping its destiny. The country is characterized by towering mountain ranges, arid deserts and deep valleys, creating natural barriers that have historically hindered invaders. The Hindu Kush, a formidable mountain range that slices through the heart of Afghanistan, has served as both a natural fortress and a symbol of Afghan resistance. Beyond the daunting physical geography, Afghanistan's social fabric has also contributed to its reputation as a graveyard of empires. The country is home to a diverse array of ethnic groups and tribes, each with its unique customs, traditions, and allegiances. This tribal structure, while often a source of internal conflict, has historically united against external threats. When foreign powers have attempted to impose their will, Afghans have often set aside their differences, uniting under a common banner of resistance. The British learned this lesson during their ill-fated campaigns in the 19th century. Afghanistan's political landscape has been as unforgiving as its terrain, marked by a tumultuous history of shifting power dynamics, internal conflicts, and external interventions. From monarchy to republic to communist rule, and back to Islamic Emirate, the country has experienced a dizzying array of political transformations, each leaving an indelible mark on its social fabric and contributing to its chronic instability. The early 20th century witnessed Afghanistan's emergence as a modern nation-state under the rule of King Amanullah Khan. Amanullah's reign, though brief, was marked by ambitious reforms aimed at modernizing the country and loosening the grip of traditionalism. However, his progressive agenda faced staunch opposition from conservative factions within Afghan society, ultimately leading to his overthrow and a period of instability. The mid-20th century saw Afghanistan caught in the throes of the Cold War, becoming a pawn in the global chess game between the Soviet Union and the United States. The country's strategic location at the crossroads of Central Asia and South Asia made it a coveted prize for both superpowers. The Taliban's return to power in 2021 marked a dramatic turning point in Afghanistan's turbulent history, casting a long shadow over the country's future. The swiftness with which the Taliban took control, following the withdrawal of US and NATO forces, shocked many observers and left the Afghan people grappling with uncertainty and fear. The Taliban's ideology, rooted in a strict interpretation of Islamic law, stands in stark contrast to the values of democracy, human rights, and gender equality that many in the international community had hoped to foster in Afghanistan. The group's previous rule from 1996 to 2001 was characterized by a brutal enforcement of their interpretation of Sharia law, resulting in widespread human rights abuses, particularly targeting women and girls. Afghanistan is facing a dire humanitarian crisis, exacerbated by the political turmoil and the Taliban's return to power. Decades of conflict have ravaged the country's infrastructure, shattered its economy, and displaced millions of people. The COVID-19 pandemic further compounded these challenges, overwhelming the country's fragile healthcare system and pushing many Afghans deeper into poverty. The most pressing issue is the widespread food insecurity that grips the nation. The United Nations estimates that over half the population is facing acute hunger, with millions teetering on the brink of famine. The collapse of the Afghan economy, coupled with drought conditions in certain regions, has disrupted food supply chains and driven up prices, making it increasingly difficult for ordinary Afghans to afford basic necessities. The healthcare system, already strained before the Taliban takeover, is now on the verge of collapse. Hospitals and clinics are struggling to cope with the influx of patients, many suffering from malnutrition, preventable diseases, and conflict-related injuries. Section 6. Women's rights under siege. The Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan has had a particularly devastating impact on women and girls who have experienced a dramatic rollback of the hard-won rights they had gained in the 2 decades since the fall of the previous Taliban regime. The Taliban's ideology, rooted in a patriarchal interpretation of Islam, views women primarily through the lens of domesticity, relegating them to the roles of wives and mothers while severely restricting their participation in public life. One of the most egregious measures imposed by the Taliban has been the ban on girls' secondary education. This decree, met with widespread condemnation from the international community, has shattered the dreams of millions of Afghan girls who aspire to learn, contribute to their communities, and shape their own destinies. Beyond education, the Taliban have imposed a slew of other restrictions on women's lives, effectively confining them to their homes. Women are prohibited from working in most sectors, except for limited roles in healthcare and education. And even then, they face stringent restrictions and segregation. Section 7. Security concerns and the rise of ISIS-K. The security situation in Afghanistan remains volatile and precarious, despite the Taliban's claims of having brought peace and stability to the country. While the Taliban were successful in ousting the previous government and assuming control, they now face a multitude of security challenges, including the resurgence of rival militant groups, internal divisions within their own ranks, and the threat of a renewed civil war. One of the most pressing security concerns is the rise of ISIS-K, an affiliate of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, which has established a foothold in Afghanistan. ISIS-K, known for its brutal tactics and extremist ideology, poses a significant threat to both the Taliban and the Afghan people. The group has claimed responsibility for numerous deadly attacks in recent years, targeting civilians, government installations, and religious minorities. The Taliban and ISIS-K are ideologically opposed, with the former seeking to establish an Islamic emirate within the geographical boundaries of Afghanistan, while the latter envisions a global caliphate. This ideological divide has translated into a violent rivalry, with both groups vying for control of territory, resources, and recruits. Section 8. Economic collapse and international sanctions. The Afghan economy, already fragile before the Taliban takeover, has been plunged into a state of utter collapse, pushing millions of people into poverty and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The confluence of factors contributing to this economic meltdown includes the sudden halt of foreign aid, which accounted for a significant portion of the Afghan government's budget, the imposition of crippling international sanctions, the closure of banks and financial institutions, and the mass exodus of skilled professionals. The international community's decision to freeze Afghan government assets held in foreign banks, coupled with the suspension of development assistance, has dealt a devastating blow to the Afghan economy. These measures, while intended to pressure the Taliban into moderating their policies and respecting human rights, have had the unintended consequence of pushing ordinary Afghans deeper into poverty and depriving them of essential services. The closure of banks and financial institutions, coupled with the Taliban's imposition of capital controls, has brought the Afghan economy to a grinding halt. Section 9. From Silk Road to impasse. Afghanistan, once a vibrant hub along the ancient Silk Road, a bustling network of trade routes connecting east and west, now finds itself at a crossroads, grappling with the legacy of conflict, political instability, and a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. The country's strategic location, once a source of prosperity and cultural exchange, has, in recent decades, become synonymous with war, insurgency, and the graveyard of empires. The Silk Road, which flourished for over a millennium, facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas and cultures between Asia, the Middle East and Europe. Afghanistan, situated at the heart of this network, played a pivotal role, serving as a conduit for the flow of silk, spices, precious metals and other valuable commodities. This strategic location brought wealth, fostered cultural exchange, and shaped Afghanistan's identity as a crossroads of civilizations. However, the 20th century ushered in an era of turmoil and conflict that transformed Afghanistan's fortunes. The country became a battleground for proxy wars, first during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, and later in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, when the United States invaded Afghanistan, targeting al-Qaeda and the Taliban regime that harbored them.